Today we're talking about the challenges of parenting and really how to handle all that stress. Parenting is rewarding, but it also can be very hard. A recent survey from the American parents by Pew Research Center reveals that parents, they've got a lot of worries on their minds, and that moms in particular are carrying much of this mental burden. Moms are also more likely than dads to say being a parent is stressful and tiring all or most of the time. So here to help us navigate our parental decisions, we have Dr. Kristen Bernard. She's an associate professor of psychology at Stony Brook University, co-founder of Power of Two. It's a New York City-based nonprofit that supports parents, and she's an expert on parent-child relationships, early childhood development, and mental health. And Dr. Wilfred Farguharson is a licensed psychologist at Stony Brook Medicine, a clinical assistant professor, and the director of the Child and Adolescent Behavioral Health Ambulatory Services. So do remember, we want to hear from you from the next half hour. We answer your questions, so you can submit them right now under the live stream of this show on our Facebook pages. All right, so Dr. Farguharson, I'm going to start with you. I want to talk about this report by researchers with Ohio State, and it looked at parents, and 66% of working parents met the criteria for parental burnout. Now, this isn't a clinical term, but really it speaks to the fact that a lot of people are exhausted.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and probably because most people are juggling multiple roles. And so when we find ourselves pulled in many directions, it can feel like burnout. And then I can imagine it comes with signs like fatigue, a lot of worry, and sometimes feeling helpless or hopeless and uncertainty of what to do. So it's definitely something that's real, and most people do experience it. And we want to know that it's a normal feeling.
Well, I think that's the thing, is to say, okay, I'm not alone in feeling this way. But Dr. Bernard, if I'm identifying, a feeling of burnout, what do I do about it?
Yeah, that's an important question. How do you take care of yourself? How do you take care of your kids when you're overwhelmed and stressed and juggling so much, as Dr. Farguharson said? There's multiple levels to think about for care, and oftentimes we're thinking about the parent. So what can the parent do themselves? And we can think about different strategies for coping, like relaxation, getting support from other people, or actually going to mental health care and getting additional services. But I think we should also be thinking about what can we do as a society? How can we alleviate some of this burden? What kind of practices and programs and policies can actually support parents? Because we know there's a lot of stress on parents these days.
Absolutely. I do want to just put up some information on the screen for everyone at home, just to really kind of quantify, for lack of a better word, exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about things like fatigue, irritability, changes in your sleep, in your appetite and mood. Even some people, reporting they have actual aches and physical pains. So Dr. Farguharson, if people are saying, yes, I'm having, trouble sleeping, I want to go cry in the driveway in my car and I can't handle what's happening, what are some of the, I'm going to say, tools in their toolkit that they can use to be able to, come back from this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think paying attention to our physical bodies is very important, right? So things like diet, exercise, and sleep is super important. And really setting up a structure that works for you in the home to be able to do those things effectively. And then, of course, emotionally having safe spaces for us to vent our emotions, tapping into additional supports. If you're fortunate enough to have a partner in your parenting endeavors, that's great. And then, of course, leaning on extended family.
Dr. Bernard, when I took a look at some of the data, a lot of it pointed to moms saying they're really burned out. 68% of working moms specifically saying they're burned out, compared to the number being 42% for dads. Why do we think that women are feeling this so much more?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential reasons for that. Some of it might just be kind of history and tradition of the division of roles based on gender, or moms feeling more responsible in some ways. Of course, we're seeing a lot of changes in that, and fathers taking a very active role, and some parents balancing that really equally in the household. But I think traditionally, like, moms still carry a lot of the burden sometimes. And of course, that depends on specific families, but that might be a piece of it.
And Dr. Farguharson, when you take a look at the Pew Research poll, which is a different data point, it showed that parents are really worried about their own kids' mental health.
Absolutely. And so it's interesting because we know that our kids take their cues from parents, right? So if parents are stressed out, they're worried that they may be passing that on. At the same time, our young people are very resilient. And I think they're oftentimes we don't give them enough credit. So I think, there's a balance of modeling what we want to see in our children and also helping our children identify their resiliency factors early on.
And I wonder too, Dr. Bernard, about, people really, I'm going to say, having their identity being a parent. I'm a dad, I'm a mom, and what that really means.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of people carry that really strongly, and that is a big part of how they identify, and a big part of their life. And most of us want to do the best that we can, and haven't always had the best models growing up, or don't have the current support that we need. And so, when you care so much about doing something well, it can be especially stressful when you feel like you're struggling.
Dr. Ferguson, I wonder too about the judgment aspect of this, and I'm going to, just kind of put social media in there. But, all of a sudden there's this comparison, and, you're looking at somebody who, made this beautiful thing that they found on Pinterest, and you're kind of sending in something that doesn't look the same, and, how we're kind of judged for what we're doing.
Absolutely. So I think there's a nice balance that we can strike here for acceptance and change, which is one of the tenets of DBT. And I liken it to like NASCAR races. You have high performing, efficient race cars going around the track, but they take breaks, and they give themselves grace and they change their tires and they give themselves fuel so that they're performing better. So we want to think of the same thing for parents. Like it's okay if you miss a step. It's okay if you take a rest.
I find personally that the moms that I can be really honest with and, vulnerable with and share kind of some of the things that are like, the mom fails really improves the relationship I have with other moms, instead of trying to be, perfect on the outside, being real with them.
I think it's important to think about being a good enough parent. No one's perfect, and maybe we're striving to be, but thinking about doing good enough so that your child feels safe and secure, and happy. And of course, there's going to be trips along the way, but just getting back up and repairing those when they happen.
I feel like, there's these different labels that they put on parents, right? And I think we've all heard about that helicopter parent. But it was interesting to me that this week someone said to me, I don't have time to be a helicopter parent, as if that was something they would even want to aspire to be. But that idea that they're, constantly hovering over their child. Then there's the koala who keeps their child close, and then the lighthouse parent guiding the way. I'm just wondering, Dr. Ferguson, are some of these ideas of parenting, like, is this creating a negative narrative?
So I think it may be, and I think a lot of what we're seeing is family values coming out in those different types of parenting styles. And so if you can ground your parenting style in your family values and your personality and that of your child or children, it's probably going to have good outcomes regardless of what everyone else says about it.
Yeah, because Dr. Bernard, I heard about the snowplow parent, and they remove all the obstacles out of the child's way, and I just thought, well, my best growth as a human has been when I stumbled and failed. So it is okay to let your kids fail.
Absolutely. It's often a balancing act, and what works for one child might not work for another child, and what works one day might not work the next day. And so really figuring out like what works for you, what works for your family, what's consistent with your family values, as Dr. Farguharson said, is the most important.
And I guess too, as a component for a parent to think about your success tied to their success or failure, Dr. Farguharson.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there is a separation there. The kids they have their resilience, but they also have a mind of their own, and they're trying to navigate the world in their own space as well. And it's a very different world than when most parents were around and coming up. So I think, guiding them, modeling what we want to see, those are great places to start. And again, if they do stumble, that's an opportunity for you to identify a resiliency factor.
Absolutely. All right. Our conversation continues on Parenting Straight Ahead.